The president of Iran just did a very interesting interview, and it reveals a lot of important things about what their current strategy is as far as negotiations. Just watch this first. I'll explain everything after. This is a Fox News interview of the Iranian president.
The United States cannot tolerate that program. What do you say to that, President Pezeshkian?
There is no place for nuclear weapons or any type of weapons of mass destruction. The unfounded accusations that they're blowing out of proportion is unacceptable. We've never sought nuclear weapons. We never will seek nuclear weapons. But if Mr. Trump if his scope is for us not to have any nuclear weapons, that was easily obtainable. There was never any tangible proof that we were seeking nuclear weapons. Therefore, they used that as an excuse to carry out an attack that they should not have.
According to U.S. intelligence, other intelligence agencies, the IAEA, was that there was enrichment at 60% levels. No energy use enrichment needs to be anywhere near those levels. And the facilities were also buried deep in the ground. In peaceful nuclear energy facilities, they're above ground.
Well, that's right. Perhaps we do not need the 60% enrichment. We know what we believe and we know what we seek. But the conversations and dialogue we had with the Europeans and with the Americans at that time led to the acceptance of the JCPOA and the International Atomic Energy Agency within the framework that was accepted mutually was carrying out the most intrusive regime of inspections ever conducted. The agency inspectors would show up anywhere, and the United States independently tore up the JCPOA.
First of all, let's tackle if he's telling the truth, right? When I covered the whole Iranian thing, or at least I talked about it over the summer, I never believed that Iran was moving towards nuclear weapons. I think they have too much tied in to their reputation, or at least what's left of it, in staying non-nuclear, right? A lot of that has to do with the Ayatollah's own statements multiple times in letters he sent to the UN. Here he maintains that nuclear weapons are un-Islamic. It would completely undermine his credibility. Also, they sign on to Article 2 of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and violating that would just completely out them. And they have stood behind that consistently. Right? Iran is a horrible country. I mean, I don't have to talk about all that. But as far as getting nuclear weapons, I don't believe anything or anyone who says that they are going in that direction. They had a program in 2003. They probably inherited a lot of knowledge from that. We know that they did because Israel infiltrated a lot of those documents. So the only thing we know that they have is the 60% enriched uranium that he talked about in the interview. And he was like, well, we might as well we can get rid of it. It's like, this is the game that Iran plays. The whole reason, and it's kind of the game Saddam Hussein played, to be honest. Maintaining that ambiguity about WMDs. It was supposed to give him some kind of negotiation, right? I'll let your inspections in if you give me this, thing in return. Same thing with Iran. They don't really want nuclear weapons. They just want nuclear latency that they can sell off to some Western bidder at an unknown price, probably for sanctions relief or cash, right? And their two negotiations tactics are inspections, number one, and uranium enrichment percentage, number two. I think that for their own society, they want to keep that sub 10% uranium enrichment, just to not be embarrassed on the global stage that they don't have that capability. But they would be willing to give up 60% if we put sanctions on the table, right? To get rid of. Because I don't think they've ever... and by the way, Trump's strikes... I'll talk about the Israeli strikes after, but Trump's strikes probably did nothing to stop Iran from making a dumb bomb. It probably halted their ability to make an ICBM or attach a warhead to a ballistic missile, but they still have the 60% enriched uranium, probably beneath Pickaxe Mountain, which no bunker buster could ever reach. Right? No one on Fox News has ever talked about Pickaxe Mountain because it's probably where all the things that Trump says he got are residing, including probably an unknown amount of centrifuges. And they can probably, it takes a few weeks to go from 60% to 90%. They can build a dumb bomb or a few of them and use that as negotiation, but it would bring them much more harm than good, right? Sanctions would get a lot worse. China and Russia would not approve of that, right? And this allyship, by the way, between China, Russia, Iran is much different than the NATO allyship. There's more animosity between them, right? They all have different interests, but that's the whole like next world order thing that people like to talk about that doesn't make much sense. All these countries have much different interests, in my opinion. But he is willing to give up all those things, right? Probably in exchange for a solution to the Israel-Palestine conflict, the end of sanctions, and then he'll say, "Oh, we'll stop funding Hezbollah." Very similar thing to what was offered to the Bush administration with the grand bargain that was turned down. Very similar to that. But overall, I would agree with him. He's not lying. I don't think Iran as a state ever wanted nuclear weapons for the many reasons I just said. He's just keeping it ambiguous for purposes of negotiation, really. He also brings up a very good point with the JCPOA. It is very important to acknowledge that the United States started this whole thing. There was zero evidence that Iran was going from 3% to 60% before the JCPOA. This is all Trump's fault that we had to do this. It's Trump's fault that Israel had the kind of precursor, or at least the shadow of a reason to bomb Iran in the way that it did, because Trump let them go to 60% in a very irresponsible action, right? And people like Ben Shapiro will say, "Oh, they were enriching them in military sites away from the inspections." It's like, you have zero evidence for that. You have zero evidence that Iran's incentives align with building a nuclear bomb, right? And now we have to deal with these Israeli bombings of Iran a few months ago, but people forget, like, they were deadly. They knocked down apartment buildings just to kill like a scientist, and they killed like a ton of civilians, right? At least hundreds. We don't have exact counts, but at the end of the day, all those IRGC personnel were easily replaceable. All the knowledge was easily replaceable. It accomplished nothing but killed people. So there's Donald Trump successfully stopping wars, even though he directly created this conflict. Could have been on much better foothold with Iran, right, than we are right now. It's just the sanctions regime has failed. It doesn't do much. It's a failure. Even if they fund these groups. Like later in the interview, they talk about Hezbollah and Hamas and ask the president to explain that. And they're like, "Oh, Israel's bad, so it justifies Hezbollah and Hamas." It's like, that's not true. Hezbollah and Hamas are terrorist organizations, mostly Hamas. But on the other hand, when we talk about geopolitics, nothing is perfect. So in order to get those groups defunded, or those terrorist groups, Iran to denounce them, we have to have a just solution to the Israel-Palestine conflict. And Israel's not much less culpable than Iran in violence. Or at least you could very easily make the argument, based on whatever standards you come up with, that they're far more culpable, that they're the initiators, right? That you could make the argument that Hamas and Hezbollah would not exist if Israel wasn't actively, a modern day Nazi state. Like, they're literal Nazis taking control of the Israeli government. I'm not saying it's Netanyahu, but at least Smotrich, has complete stranglehold over that government. He can shut it down whenever he wants, and he's an actual Nazi. And at least 70% of their youth support that in astonishing polls. Not to tangent that much, but there was a poll that was like 64% of Israelis thought that there should be a complete cease of reporting on suffering in Gaza. And 64% also said, or it might have been 63%, that there are no innocent Palestinians. That is the kind of society we're dealing with, and that society elects the government that we have to deal with. So that government, that has to be stopped. They have to give up land in the West Bank if you want a true solution to Iran and their hostilities. You can't solve it through throwing out the JCPOA, which was actually moving in the right direction. But that's it.